Let's be real. Nothing hits quite like that notification. After days of silence, your phone lights up and it's him. Instantly, your mood shifts. Your curiosity spikes. And before you even open the message, your mind is already racing with questions. Why now? What changed? Is this a second chance? Or just a moment of weakness on his end? This is exactly why his text feels so powerful. It's not just about the message. It's about the gap before it. Silence creates emotional tension. It builds mystery. It makes you wonder, replay memories, and fill in the blanks with your own hopes and assumptions. So when he finally reaches out, it feels meaningful, even if it might not be. But here's what most people don't realize. The power you feel in that moment isn't really about him. It's about the emotional buildup that happened while he was gone. And if you don't understand this, you risk giving that single text way more importance than it deserves. So before you reply, pause. Because what you do next can either pull you back into confusion or put you back in control. When communication stops, it's easy to assume he's completely moved on, like you've been erased from his mind. But that's rarely how it actually works. At first, the silence often feels like relief to him. There's no pressure to reply, no emotional expectations, no need to explain himself. He gets space, and for a moment, that space feels comfortable. He tells himself, this is fine. I needed this. But here's where things start to shift. As days pass, curiosity slowly creeps in. He begins to notice your absence in subtle ways. Maybe it's the lack of your messages, your energy, or even the attention he was used to receiving from you. And without realizing it, he starts to wonder, why hasn't she reached out? That question is powerful because now, instead of you thinking about him, he's thinking about you. Then comes the ego phase. He might assume you'll eventually break the silence. He expects you to text first, to check in, to reopen the door. And when that doesn't happen, it challenges his expectations. It makes him pause. Now something deeper kicks in. Uncertainty. He starts replaying past conversations. He wonders if he misjudged you, if you've moved on, if someone else has your attention now. And that uncertainty creates emotional tension on his side. This is the moment where your silence gains power, because instead of chasing, you've become unpredictable. And unpredictability creates attraction. It pulls his focus back toward you, not because you said something, but because you didn't. Eventually, that internal pressure builds up. Curiosity, ego, and uncertainty mix together until he feels the urge to act. And that's often when he reaches out. Not always because he has clarity, but because he wants to feel something again, to reconnect, to see if the door is still open. Understanding this changes everything, because his silence wasn't empty. It was a process. And knowing that process gives you the advantage of responding with awareness instead of emotion. So after all that silence, he finally reaches out. And your first instinct might be to think, he must really miss me. But the truth is a little more complex and a lot more revealing. When a man texts you first again, it's usually not driven by one clear emotion. It's a mix of curiosity, ego, and unfinished emotional business. During the silence, you became a question mark in his mind, and people are naturally drawn to resolve what feels incomplete. He's wondering, is she still interested? Did I lose her? Can I still come back into her life? That's the real trigger behind that message. Sometimes it's about validation. He wants to see if he still has access to you, if you'll respond, engage, or give him the same energy as before. Not necessarily because he's ready for something serious, but because your attention made him feel good. Other times it's about familiarity. You represent comfort, someone who understands him, someone he doesn't have to start over with. And when life feels uncertain or lonely, people often return to what feels easy and known. But here's the key insight. Just because he texted you first doesn't automatically mean his intentions have changed. His message is an invitation, not a commitment. And this is where many people lose their power. They assume the text carries more meaning than it actually does. They respond with excitement, emotion, and availability without first understanding why he came back. So instead of getting pulled in instantly, take a step back. His action tells you he's thinking about you, but your response determines what happens next. This is the question that changes everything, because not every hey carries the same intention, even if it feels exciting in the moment. When a man is genuinely interested, his energy is consistent and intentional. He doesn't just send one message and disappear again. He follows up. He asks questions. He tries to keep the conversation going and move it forward. You feel effort, not confusion. But when he's just bored, the pattern looks very different. His message is often casual, vague, or even random. Something like, "Hey, what's up?" or "Been a while." There's no real direction behind it. And after a few replies, his energy fades again. He might take hours or days to respond, leaving you right back where you started. The key difference isn't what he says. It's how he shows up after he says it. Interest creates momentum. Boredom creates temporary attention. Another sign to watch is timing. If he only reaches out late at night, during weekends, or when he's likely alone, that's often a sign he's filling a gap, not building something meaningful. And here's the part most people ignore: how you feel after interacting with him. If you feel secure, valued, and clear, that's a good sign. But if you feel confused, anxious, or like you're overanalyzing every message, that's your intuition telling you something isn't aligned. So don't get distracted by the fact that he texted you first. Pay attention to the pattern that follows, because that's where his true intentions are revealed. There's a pattern here that most people miss, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It usually starts with strong attention. He shows interest, messages you consistently, makes you feel seen. Then, slowly, something shifts. The energy drops. Communication becomes inconsistent. And before you can fully understand what happened, there's silence. You start questioning yourself. Did I say something wrong? Did I come on too strong? So when he finally comes back, it feels like relief. Like things are going back to how they were, but they're not. This creates a cycle. Attention, distance, return, emotional pull. And every time it repeats, it pulls you in deeper. Not because the connection is growing, but because the inconsistency is keeping you hooked. It's the unpredictability that makes it powerful. When someone is always available, your emotions stay stable. But when their presence comes and goes, it creates highs and lows. And those emotional spikes can feel like chemistry, when in reality, it's just instability. That's the hidden pattern. And if you're not aware of it, you start chasing the feeling, not the person. You respond faster, give more, try harder, hoping to bring back the version of him from the beginning. But here's the truth. Real interest doesn't disappear and reappear like this. So the moment you notice this pattern, you have a choice. You can stay in the cycle, or you can break it by no longer rewarding inconsistency with your attention. Here's something most people overlook. When he texts you, can tell you more than what he says. Timing is never random. It reflects what's happening in his world and where you fit into it. If he reaches out after a long silence at very specific moments, late at night, during weekends, or when he's likely alone, that usually points to convenience, not commitment. In those moments, he's not necessarily thinking about building something with you. He's responding to a feeling, maybe boredom, maybe loneliness, maybe just curiosity. But when a man is genuinely interested, his timing looks different. He doesn't wait for the perfect moment when he has nothing else going on. He creates time. He reaches out consistently, regardless of the day or situation, because staying connected to you matters. Another important detail is how long he waited. If he disappears for days or weeks and then casually reappears like nothing happened, that tells you something. It shows he felt comfortable leaving the connection unattended and expects to pick it back up without effort. That's not emotional investment. That's access without accountability. And here's the deeper layer. Timing also reveals priority. People make time for what they value. So if his messages only appear when it suits him, you're not a priority. You're an option he revisits when it's convenient. This doesn't mean you need to confront or question him immediately. Instead, observe. Let his timing speak for itself. Because once you start paying attention to when he shows up, you stop getting distracted by the excitement of the message and start seeing the reality behind it. This is the moment where everything can either shift in your favor or pull you right back into confusion. The first mistake, responding too quickly with too much emotion. The second his message pops up, you feel that rush and you reply instantly, maybe even with excitement you've been holding in. But what this does is signal one thing. Nothing has changed. He left, came back, and still has the same easy access to your energy. The second mistake is acting like the silence never happened. You skip over the gap, avoid addressing it, and jump straight into normal conversation. This teaches him that disappearing has no consequence, that he can come and go without ever explaining himself, and you'll still be there. Another common trap is over-investing too soon. You start asking questions, carrying the conversation, trying to rebuild the connection quickly. But instead of matching his effort, you end up doing more than him. And that imbalance, it slowly lowers your value in his eyes. Then there's the mistake of reading too much into the message itself. You assume it means he misses you deeply, that he's changed, that this is a turning point. But a single text doesn't equal intention. It's just an opening, and it needs to be backed by consistent action. And finally, the biggest mistake, ignoring how you actually feel. If his return brings confusion, anxiety, or mixed signals, that's important. But instead of listening to that, many people push those feelings aside just to keep the connection going. Here's the truth. This moment isn't about impressing him or keeping his attention. It's about observing him. Slow down. Match his energy. Let him show you why he came back instead of assuming it. Because the way you handle this one moment sets the tone for everything that follows. So he texted you. Now what? This is where most people either step into their power or give it away without realizing it. First, don't rush to reply. Not as a game, not to teach him a lesson, but to give yourself a moment to reset emotionally. When you respond instantly from excitement or relief, you're reacting, not choosing. Power comes from responding with clarity, not impulse. Next, keep your tone calm and grounded. You don't need to mirror his silence with coldness, and you don't need to overcompensate with enthusiasm. A simple, neutral response is enough. Something that shows you're open to conversation, but not overly invested in it. Now here's the key.